Welcome to Cut Daisies and Unicorns, and we are here, and it is our regular time that we're back in the studio. We're here to deliver you premium content. Right, Steve? We got premium content.
That's PC.
Right.
Premium content.
Premium content.
You can hear it in Phil's voice, can't you?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. You're feeling pretty good about life right now.
Yeah, this is premium content.
I can hear it in your voice.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what's new in the hood?
Welcome back, everyone.
Hood.
Well, you know, it's a day designed for Steve-O.
Yeah.
A little overcast.
Mm-hmm.
I ran into some rain on the way heading south. And, and so hopefully it'll be a lovely day.
Lovely overcast day.
Lovely day. Made a quick trip into the studio yesterday, just getting back on track. You know, the thing is, I can get so easily derailed.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a good run going.
You did.
A really, really good run going. And then we take a little trip. And that little trip, I literally have not been in the studio full time on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
It was a full week.
Yeah.
Hadn't been back. It's like, check.
Mm-mm. Yeah, because you had domestic Wednesday last week, right? That was like right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was, I don't know, there was, because, I mean, we had projects going on. And so we had projects on Monday, we had projects on Thursday.
Yeah.
Got on a jet plane. Not really. It's an electric blue FJ.
Uh-huh.
So then made the trip and was gone and came back, and then, I mean, now the good news is, made an upgrade to the cable, the interwebs on our side of the shore, and my upload speeds are tripled. So
nice.
I have to say that's a motivating factor.
Did you get that white tower one?
I did.
Yeah, is that the one? Yeah.
Yeah, you know about the white tower?
I've seen they keep wanting me to upgrade, which, it's possible, but
yeah,
especially with my son having another gaming system that eats all of our internet.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, and he's like, hey, so, maybe we need an internet upgrade. I said, well, you're paying for it then.
Well, the cool thing is right now, to be able to get up to the fastest one, they're giving a 12-month with credit. And so it looks like on paper that it'd be I don't know, $119 plus taxes.
Yeah.
But by the time you get the credit for the 12 months and all that stuff, and I know, but I get to realize the greatest savings, which is dropping cable. I mean, that still takes our cable bill down in half.
Right. And
the upgrade. Now, in theory, these are things that, when you have information, you don't have to share all that you know.
Yeah.
I mean, withholding information isn't lying. It's just not sharing.
Right.
And so, in theory,
it's not lying.
that was taught to me by my my Old Testament professor.
Yeah.
In college, Manfred Kober. German.
Quite a name.
German gentleman.
Yeah.
With his doctorate. And Manfred spoke fluent German and actually spent many years, I would say 20 plus, smuggling Bibles and other pamphlets behind, what was the wall? Did they call it the Iron Curtain?
Oh, yeah. You mean like the Berlin Wall or the...
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Iron Curtain was the USSR, like Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the Iron Curtain.
No, so it was the Berlin Wall.
Wall.
Yeah, to go back behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Wow.
so here's a professor dealing with the morality of what happens when you do you lie about what's in your suitcases? So there's the the circumstance of, so then it was always based on Rahab, the harlot, and how that when they came to get they were chasing down the spies that were in the land,
Right.
and checking out what was going on, and Rahab hid them.
Yeah.
And so then there was this whole part about that she lied to cover God's spies, and how does that happen?
Right.
And so we can really uncork a can of worms here in
Right.
dealing with that. Now,
Yeah. Ethics. What are the ethics?
full disclosure, I did say, hey, we saved $85, right?
There you go.
So the details of could I have saved $125? I could have,
Right.
but then my internet upload speeds would still be at 6 meg per second,
Yeah.
which is horribly slow.
Yeah. And for trying to stream and that's going to be.
Well, streaming, the whole download part, and stuff like that, we never had problems with that with the TV and stuff. And we don't have gaming in our home, and but yeah, download speeds were great. It was the upload speeds. And the guy looked at me, he goes, "You do understand you have industrial strength internet now." I'm like, industrial strength. I feel like all of a sudden, who's the bald guy that's on the cleaning?
Mr. Clean?
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean. Yeah. Just all right. Yeah, cool. I have industrial strength internet. Thank you, Al Gore.
Yep. Thanks, Al Gore.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be able to get cut daisies up to you quicker now. You're like, I didn't even know.
Well, they
and
would,
you don't know.
They wouldn't know, but and we started out with the whole idea of when we started our 6th season, or no, maybe it was even the 5th season, because we're on our 2nd season of 2022, right?
Right.
So when we started in 2022, we're like, hey, we need to cut back our content because we were rambling on into it like a 2-hour zone.
Right.
To upload a 2-hour video for us would take me 3.5 to 4 hours.
Yeah. That's a long time.
So in theory, then when we cut back to our goal was 45 minutes, and we ended up at an hour and 15. Well, that drastically reduced. So all of a sudden, 3.5 hours goes to an hour and a half, right?
Right.
Well, if I do the math, in theory, I should be able to upload a full-length video in 45 minutes. That's pretty good.
Not bad.
It used to be for the sermons for Tabor. I did them in the morning. It was 45 minutes for a 35-minute sermon. Now, when you preach for 50 minutes...
Well, these ones have been going longer. I've been asking questions. That's why.
I see. Is that the reason why?
I guess. Sure. I'm gonna put it that way at
least. There's class participation. This class takes longer.
Right.
But anyway, so then when you drop them in there, a 50-minute session with the people is taking 18 minutes. So
Yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. Now, what I did notice, and it's super handy for all the techno geeks out there, is I do have two. What I can't do, and I was hoping I could do, is if I could upload from the same computer while I'm working on editing and stuff like that. In theory, it should work out fine.
Yeah.
But what you have is my computer working on, and what I didn't do is I didn't pull the file back onto my desktop, so it's transferring it from the external drive to take it into the port that's going to be and I wasn't connected directly. So these are all speed things, but yeah. So in theory, I should be able to just take my little external drive and get it onto the second computer, and it all works out. And I could still work on editing other stuff.
Sure.
Which isn't bad. You don't have to worry about doing that when you're doing Cut Daisies.
Yeah.
It's when I'm like 14 videos behind for Tabor that shows up as it could really end up working out. But I'm down to the last 3. And so
getting caught up.
All the loose ends. What do you do with your loose ends out there in the universe?
Most of the time, I think I just take scissors and cut them. Just cut it off.
Yeah,
there's no more loose ends once you cut it off.
Do straggling strings bother you?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, these are the things that you and Amy have in common.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, I walk around, I got strings hanging all over the place. I have other people that come and pick my strings.
Right. Especially, I think, if they're in eye view, and I'm always catch my eye with these strings. Cut it off. Just cut it off.
Just cut it off.
Mm-hmm.
You don't carry fingernail clippers in your pocket to do that.
I don't, though. No.
See, now, and this is just degrees. We're just helping the audience understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
How much of a level of annoyance does it cause? I'll run around and try to find at least little scissors to cut it off. If
little
that's
scissors.
Right. Cut it off.
Yeah, I don't want to be coming at you with a big old full-on size of Fiskars. Hashtag, if you like quilts, you know what I'm talking about.
Quilting. Do you quilt?
No.
All right. But you're familiar with quilting.
My mom and my sister both are, I would call them professional quilters. And especially now as we're into waning of summer.
Yeah.
Then I think both are professional plate spinners too. I come by that genetically in my code. My grandmother, Grandma Rosella, she always had multiple projects going on that she would bounce to. And so as the winter months approach, I think then with the kind of more getting locked up inside and stuff like that. But yeah, my sister, my mom will say my sister is a superior quilter to herself.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And it's funny because my sister will be like, all right, we got this. Here, move. And she just busts stuff out. I mean, but, and another person who is an avid quilter is Gail Webb. I didn't know if you knew that about her.
I didn't.
So when I'm taking a look at, hey, what's it going to cost for me to buy this rock tumbler? I mean, people who really know how to sew and stuff, when they start investing in their sewing machines, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, but then these machines do some crazy stuff.
Because then you're also, assume with the sewing machines with quilts, you have to have somewhat of a larger unit to send things through.
Not really.
No?
No, because the quilt work, you got your square work, and then you join the squares. Well, it's all these little squares. I'm sure managing, that. The thing that you're talking about is more of a boom, like a boom machine, where the quilt goes over the top and they can program in. And then when you have your top, your back, and then the fill, then these big finishing machines go through and they can end up sewing. And that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's Grandma's way. She had quilt racks, and then once you got that, then you stretched the backing, the fill, and then the top, and you stretched down the rack, and then you went through, and then it was a hand sew for all of this stuff that machines are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. The
Did we
things that I
talk-
don't know about quilting.
Did we talk about? Oh yeah, we talked about the rocket ship last
We
week.
did,
You know, and whether landing on the moon was a thing or not a thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so with technology, that's what I don't understand how we can't get to the moon if we've got more technology in our phones than was in the first, spaceship.
Right.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
Heard that quote. But one of the things that technology brings us is it brings us into probably, I think for the last decade, haven't we been talking about like the wealth of information at our fingertips?
Mm-hmm.
And how all of this information, like I've been going through the Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Yellowstone is gonna launch.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't decided yet if what I want to do is let it launch and like force a queue. So like 3 weeks later or 4 weeks later, then a binge 4 episodes.
Oh.
That might seem more enjoyable.
Yeah.
That didn't happen with Better Call Saul. Like I ended up following that, and there was something else that was dropping about the same time. And I thought, I'm just gonna. Well, now the new Game of Thrones. What's the new series called?
House of Dragons.
Yeah, yeah. And if you've watched The Queen on Netflix, I think that's the thing about Princess Diana or Queen Elizabeth.
Oh, The Crown.
The Crown. The guy who plays Queen Elizabeth's husband in that series is actually one of the lead guys for. Yeah. He's kind of got a.
He's got an edge.
He's got a unique face. Yeah. It's soft.
Well, I think the Targaryens are pretty. They're pretty light-skinned, and then they've got right.
Yeah. But I mean, I watched that while I was editing some video this week, and I was like, you know what? I kind of I like this. I like how they've cast it. The really cool thing is it gives you a historic reference to these characters that you've known from the other. There are other people who are like, I wouldn't even give you $1 for that trash. Me personally, I'm looking forward to the prequel work for the J.R.R. Tolkien thing.
Oh, like the rings.
Yeah. That'll be cool to see.
Yeah, when does that one hit? That's soon too, right?
Well,
I mean, they released another trailer at least.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They're saying it soon. But
okay.
So we're talking about information in the information age.
Yeah.
And with all of that, we've found ourselves, can we at least go to that throughout humanity there have become, and we'll use our current day word, there were different seasons, like pre-printing press.
Right.
That was a time that I think fell into what they called the Dark Ages.
Right.
Then the printing press came, that kind of blew up.
Right.
Changing things. We got Martin Luther nailing the 95 Thesis to the door of the Catholic Church. He becomes, literally...
Which he capitalized on the printing press that was just like 20 years into that technology. He capitalized on it, so... Yeah, so the Protestant Reformation was really boomed because of printing press technology.
Yes. For the record, when we're talking Christianese here, for people, religiosity, religious talk and speak and stuff like that, we do want to put for the Western cultured church the idea that Martin Luther wasn't a saint when he did that. Like, he actually came under great scrutiny, and, if they could have killed him, they would have.
Oh, yeah.
If they could have found him at the time, they would have killed him.
Yeah, he would have been dead.
Kind of an outlaw of sorts, going against the current system's rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Can I paint that picture, and would it be fair?
No, it's good.
Yeah. So...
He for sure was an outlaw. They would have killed him.
Now... the motivation was, and this is historic accuracy according to my memory, okay? There's no YouTube thing that I've listened to, or there's no Google that I've looked this up. This is just according to my memory. So if my memory doesn't serve me correct, we need to get out the silver, polish it, and then serve up the reality.
Right.
Are you with me?
Got it.
So my understanding is it was his study of the book of Romans that brought him to a place where what he was faced with, what he could not deal with unless he dealt with it, was that he was faced with grace. And the major pin for Martin Luther was, it's not by works, but it's by grace. And so a works-based theology. Now, for all of you who are coming and wondering if we're going to talk about big-eyed aliens, the answer today is no. All right? But
not today.
And this is, if you want to look under the skirt of our theology, this is us getting in to you can have a calm lake with a really strong undertow. This is under the toe of the seemingly peaceful serenity parts of Steve and Phil.
Yeah.
Phil and Steve, the cut, the daisies, the unicorns. All right, so we're back to Martin Luther. Martin Luther, then, when there was an illumination, I'm going to use that word, there was an illumination within him about this truth.
Yeah.
Then got caught up because the Roman Catholic Church was actually charging people to forgive them for their sins.
Right.
So it was about money.
They were selling indulgences.
There you go. And as those indulgences were sold, so then the rich were pure and the poor were not pure. They were sinners. They were condemned. Now, I'm using this language specifically so you can draw correlations within what is taking place in this season. And so all of that was taking place, and we've got Martin here, Sir Martin Luther. I'm just making this up.
He's knighting him right now. I deem you, sir.
Yeah, Sir Martin Luther. So, Martin Luther then... Martin Luther was an outlaw in the religious circles. Now, here's what where I'm taking this. How does that person who's an outlaw, allowing for and making way, really with the hammer, breaking open or pulling back the curtain of darkness concerning what was veiled over the people, then allows for this thing that all Protestants would then move into? I mean, there's people in this world who believe that Lutherans are heretics.
Oh, yeah. And they definitely would call Luther a heretic. There's no ifs and or buts. I mean, people would say that Luther is not just a heretic, but also currently burning in hell. As an apostate. So that's the real news is, they already declare him as such, so therefore if anybody is in that way, of course, yeah, sure.
But without Luther doing what Luther did, none of these people would exist in their belief system. This is Ludacris a rapper?
I think so.
Yeah, this is ludicrous.
It's ludicrous.
So I'm bringing that out because this is how finite dualistic thought process and tribalism becomes.
Oh yeah.
So nobody's taking in. All right. So personal. I'm using all the Christianese today. Personal testimony from Steve. That's the church lady. That's me imitating Dana Carvey. It's testimony time. But so there's the whole part of how fast in our minds that we get involved in this tribalism. And if you look in the current day right now, if you listen to anything from public radio, you go on the TV, the news and stuff. Right now, there is no separation between quote unquote church and state, because they're talking about the influence of the right wing conservatives and how that affects politics. And a lot of conservatives have moved into where they have tied so much about their faith system
right
into what the leader of our country should or ought to be. Now, for people who are wondering, this is a really long trail to get into the topic of the day. All right? But I needed to move.
Follow along.
I needed to move from history into.
Sure.
So, I remember having been, I don't know, bred and born. If I was born, no, not. My parents are first generation attenders of church. And I should say it this way. In finding faith together, I was a baby, and moving into a practicing of faith together. That's how I should say it, because it didn't mean that they didn't attend church at some time. And so, but I remember, and now it's been, like 13 to 15 years ago when I went to a Lutheran church to be able to lead worship and be a part of that church and that faith system. That all the people who were, this is the testimony part, all the people who were like from my background before, they're like, how can you do that?
Yeah.
You're a heretic. You've left the faith. Well, I find this as an interesting view of me leaving the faith.
Right.
Faith didn't leave me. Like the core of what was within me, and me, and I'm still gonna put this on experiential theology. Okay. There was no shift or move within my core, my heart, my soul. And I will not say in my mind, because I really don't believe that that's where faith rests. Because you can have really smart people who have great minds, who are like, yeah, I don't get this, and so you know what? That's okay. That's okay for them not to get it.
Right.
It's okay for them to declare it. They're not my enemy because they don't get it.
Right.
Do I need to underscore that? I'm going to get into preacher mode here. They are not my enemy.
Yep.
Actually, I think somewhere in the sacred text, somewhere, it says that I should love my neighbor as myself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's real, right? It's not real. Just like a made-up thing that sounds religious or sounds like it's from the Bible. Yeah, I mean, love my neighbor. Does it say I should love my neighbor if they're the same denomination as I am?
Nope.
I should love my neighbor as long as they're a part of the same denomination and the same nation that I'm in. No. So I'm supposed to love my neighbor. I should.
And then who is your neighbor? That's always the question that you're asking ultimately. I mean, that's the same question that arose. When he said, love your neighbors, well, who is my neighbor?
So, that means I should love Canadians.
Yeah.
Like, if my neighboring as a nation is loving those who neighbor our boundaries,
our actual borders,
our borders,
real or imaginary.
So I should love Canadians, and I should love people from Mexico.
Yeah.
What? I should love them?
You should.
As myself.
Yeah. But I also would say that neighboring goes beyond just our direct borders. I mean, so if we're international travelers, we're not all right, so I'm here in this foreign country, And I wonder if I should love the people that are in front of me as well. Well, they're not my direct neighbors. They're international neighbors. But guess what? They're still neighbors because I'm coming into contact with them. So that's where, like, our dualism says I shouldn't love them because they're not my direct neighbors. I shouldn't have to love them because I'm not going to see these people again, or I'm not going to see these people very frequently if I'm a frequent international traveler to whatever spot it might be. So when we are thinking about neighbors and we're thinking about loving, who it is that is put in front of us, then it's going to be wide and varied. Now, our neighborhood here in Albany Park, one of the most diverse in the nation.
It is.
And so you're looking at, we can love internationally right within our own neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because we actually have real neighbors here that are international.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you come to a conclusion of still being able to say, I need to look at and see people differently than the way that we've seen them? Or that what's presented before us is like what we would call religious nationalism. We can say Christian nationalists. We can say whoever national, right? I mean, that is already setting up a dual mind.
Yes.
Like, we're on this side, and this is what we want to see.
Us and them.
We don't want them.
Us and them. Mm-hmm. Like, we are this. Now, hey, tribalism is really easy to establish.
Oh, yeah.
Who are your people and who do you hang with?
Mm-hmm.
That's your tribe.
Right.
And actually, I've used that in the past to exploit mass growth and gathering. But what I would say is the very same light that illuminated Martin Luther to say it's not by work. And see, here's why. By the time we get to the end of this, you'll be like, holy cow, I never thought about it that way. Maybe you don't say holy before you say cow. But, I mean, literally, the same light that illuminated the truth for Martin Luther to take the step and say it's not by works. I don't know a lot of evangelicals. Now, we've moved, if you need to do a dictionary thing on these words, okay?
Right.
So
Which you might, and it's fine.
We moved from the Reformation gave birth to Protestants.
Right.
Protestants were anyone who wasn't
Catholic.
All right.
Just like Jews and Gentiles. Gentiles are anybody who's not Jewish.
Yes. But it doesn't mean that Gentiles can't practice the Jewish faith.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, just we're helping people connect the dots. Or anybody who has heard these conversations before would be like, you're mansplaining all of this, Coble. Come on, stop it.
Right.
Well,
I mean, if we had other people in on this conversation, we would be allowing them to be able to make room for this as well, though. So
right, and that's why, for those of you who consider this elementary, there are people who may be listening to this who find this fascinating because it's the first time that they've heard. They've heard about, but they didn't understand, and so I just wanted, when we moved then from Protestantism, then there was the birth of evangelicalism, and so evangelicals like to, in a twofold separation statement from their points of faith, they like to be able to build in separation between church and state. Is on the national or the governmental level. Then they like to build in a personal separation, which would be, I don't smoke, I don't chew, I don't go with girls who do, and I don't know if that leaves room for that you do drink. But in the church that I grew up, it wasn't, there was no tobacco, there was no alcohol, there was no going to movie theaters, there was no playing cards. Now, some people would be like, holy cow, what?
Yeah. It's a lot of restriction.
Compared to a Mennonite? I don't think so.
I know. There you go.
See, there's the perspective, folks, is that in and so then what makes a Mennonite a Mennonite? What makes a Baptist, what makes a Presbyterian? Mm-hmm. One of my, I know I've said this before somewhere in the podcast in the last 6 seasons. You've heard this, but I'll say it again.
Yeah.
My favorite quote from The River Runs Through It. What are Presbyterians? And the dad says, they're Baptists who can read. And the Baptists are all offended right now in saying, what? Like, oh yeah. So, there's the parts where now I'm gonna do the link. I've heard this story. I don't know it to be true, but I understand that the Desert Fathers, Desert Mothers, back in the day when they were forced into a seclusion, probably within the realm of James chapter 1, to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, I give greeting. All right, so there was a group of leaders that had been scattered, and they were hiding out so they wouldn't be killed by, the people of authority and power and control of the day. But even when it came to communion, like, they used sand and water to observe communion. It wasn't juice or wine and bread because they didn't have it.
Right.
So then somebody would say, well, the mode's all wrong. See, in this current situation today, the tribalism and we're not even talking about the difference between consubstantiation and transubstantiation, which is a different trans word than a lot of people would be familiar with today. Okay? And they're like, but mode matters. So you got the same people who are talking about an ordinance versus
sacrament.
You got the same people who are committed to the sacraments are ordinances, which means that there's nothing special that happens. This is a reflection of we're showing obedience by participating in remembrance of these things that have occurred. All right? So there in evangelicalism that it's an ordinance, not a sacrament. The sacrament system believes that there is a grace bestowed. It is mystery. It cannot be explained. And people are like, well, if you can't explain it, then you're taking the lazy route. Well, or you're letting God be God. So then we come into this, okay, you got, but people who don't believe that there's anything special about this would say that the mode matters or it doesn't count. I.e., Baptists would say that if you're not fully immersed, and if it's not a believer's baptism, then it doesn't count as a baptism.
Right.
But we're talking about an ordinance. What does it matter? Well, the mode matters.
Oh, so then the mode matters then.
The mode matters then. So what about the purists who believe in a trifold baptism? See? And so then you have Church of Christ or Christ Church. When they baptize, not only is it immersion, but it's a threefold baptism. So every time you name one of the Godhead, then the person goes down into the waters of baptism.
Right.
Now, I think that we would be at the place and point. I don't know where you're at, Phil, but quite frankly, if somebody's like the eunuch, and it was Peter at the time, I think in the book. Philip. Your namesake.
That's right.
So you got Philip riding along in a chariot, and you got the picture in the children's Bible of the eunuch who was a black gentleman. And he's like, well, what would keep me from being baptized? And he's like, nothing. But actually, there's 2 baptisms going on during that time in the account. Yeah. There was the baptism of the Holy Spirit, which came after Pentecost, and there was physical baptism. People are like, this is really getting complicated. That is my point. It's really, really complicated. And so based on the generation, I'm getting back to my testimony. People are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I think the Lutherans were closer to the conception of Christianity than the Baptists were. Maybe they got something right. That's Steve being a smartass.
Right.
You know, because, but again, based on the trifold level of separation, you have separation of church and state, you have personal separation, what you will and won't do, and then you have the religious separation. Well, we're not going to do things with the apostates.
Right. Within Christianity, yes, there is separation.
So then when a small town, let's say a town of population, this is small town, population of between 3,000 and 6,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably have 10 to 17 churches. And then they want to do a community service. There are people who won't participate in the community service on the grounds of separation.
Right.
We don't want to do that with apostates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't believe like us, so we cannot do that together.
Yeah, because if we do it together, people are going to think that we agree on what we believe.
Right.
Hold it. How much of agreeing on anything is happening in today's world?
Hardly any.
All right.
Yes, and so I think where you're trying to be able to lead us to is the understanding of what do we do when confronted with something that doesn't go with our current set of understanding of the world, faith, spirituality. What happens when we are confronted with it? What are we going to do with it? How are we going to process it?
Well,
how are we going to not create a dualistic world where we're going to say, this is something new and it doesn't match what I currently hold, so this must be bad and wrong?
And the criminalization of the outlaw within a faith structure.
Yeah.
At what point is that okay based on illumination? I used the term, if you go back and you need to go back to the very beginning, I talked about an illumination.
Mm-hmm.
A light within that allowed for Luther to come to a truth that had not been realized to that point, or had, I would suggest, actually had been lost.
Yeah. Yeah, because I would definitely say, so even though Luther would be known as like a pinnacle for Protestant Reformation, it doesn't mean that there weren't reformers before. It wasn't like there were people like, John, like, what's his, John, now I'm blanking. But either way, you can go
Wesley?
back and Google. No, Wesley was after.
Yeah, definitely post.
Wycliffe? No, I think he was out. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Wycliffe, I think, was later. So, but either way. So you get these people who were actually speaking some things earlier. Guess what happened to those early reformers?
They got killed.
Right. I mean, they got, usually, by the church, burnt at the stake. So it would have been the same thing as we just mentioned earlier when we were talking about. Luther would have been the same direction. He would have been burnt at the stake too for what he was talking about, what he was
John Knox.
Yeah.
In Scotland.
So
John Calvin.
Calvin was after too. He was same lifetime as Luther. I think they met at some point in time, but Luther would have been older. So when you're looking at these, you're also saying, like, when you imagine being the first person who's going to stand up and say, yeah, like, I don't see it this way, and hey everybody, I just want to tell you, the things that I'm seeing and how it might be different. And somebody's going to be like, wait a second, you can't say anything different. Well, why? What's going to happen early on? What happened? You died. So, like, it discourages people from being able to say, hey, I wonder if I should stand up next time and say something. No. The reason why they were killing people and, calling them heretics was to discourage anybody else from doing likewise. So now you look at some of those people and you're like, well, I mean, were they heretics? I don't know. But some of the stuff that they were talking about wouldn't be seen as heresy today. That's all I know. So how do we decipher and walk through? So somebody's saying something and you're like, oh, red flag, there's something that's off here. All right, let's process it. Well, how do we bring it in? I mean, and even there, as you talked about, illumination, which is light from within, right? And it comes from someplace. How do we understand? All right, I've got this thing that's happening. I've got this stuff that I'm processing. How do I handle it? How do I sort through this stuff?
Yeah, and I think of, like my son Micah with grandson Wesley.
Yeah.
So there may be people who are entering into the parental phase of life and are less concerned with themselves and more concerned with their children. Oftentimes, I found, when I was in leadership within a church, that transition times created the opportunity for people to consider what change would need to occur. And so, and oftentimes in a family's life, they were more likely to come to church for the sake of their children, so that their children could be in Sunday school or, and things like that. But, generationally, what does it mean to pass on? Now, I will, and I can't speak for her, but I will say that my mom, Marilyn, at the age of 75, and she'd probably say, hey, wait, that doesn't happen until October. Okay, at the age of 74, Mom, she would tell you that she has discovered, and lights have gone on in things within her practice and belief system. In the last 2 years, she has discovered things that she didn't realize were so true and so available. But the discovery isn't going forward into what's new. It's actually going backwards into what's old. And that is, to your point, and the questions that we're asking is, how is all the old thrown away, and we have our new divine truth? It's the absolute truth that we know. And our good friend Chris had brought this up on our live, which actually, speaking of video edits that I have not done, I don't think I've added our last live show onto the tubes.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I don't think I have the audio up either. So.
Right, yeah. So there's that. But, what value system would you put in place that would allow you to be able to, and here again, here's a word, multiple words, that lets you weigh. The flip coin term would be discern. How do you navigate life? Can we pull it from the religious speak and talk to come into what is within humanity of how you navigate all of your physical being, life, wholeness, and then transcend? I'm using, again, a different term that back in the day, would have been used towards New Age thought process, and people could say, well, yeah, Koval, you're a New Age freak anyway, so. But all through my spiritual journey, I would just be really okay with saying to people that there was a point of discernment within me that I had tendencies not to conform to information that power and control disseminated and have been used to a path of, well, that's not how most people think. Well, yeah, I'm okay with that. Are you okay with me? I'm not really worried about me being okay with where I'm at.
Right.
And so, which, I mean, like, literally, if people want to know more about what that looks like, go listen to an episode on our time travel stuff. You're going to get a real dose of the seen and the unseen and what I think about time travel. We're not going to do that here right now.
Right.
But it gives you, and people are like, that's weird. Yeah, it's weird. But again, as an experiential theologian, people are like, now you're getting into rocky roads. That's difficult. You shouldn't be messing around with that. Well, I'm not pulling out a Ouija board to figure out what's going to happen in 2037. So, these are the things. How can people be comfortable with working through that stuff? That's what values, what things can we put out there for people to help be able to discern about these things?
And I think that even, because I think the closer you get to those, what you would say core values, and being challenged in it, would be the closer you're getting to that. And, it's almost like the nerve, right? The nerve, if you touch a nerve, it hurts.
Yeah.
And so the closer you get to those core values, which I believe are at the nerve, like, and somebody's challenging those core values, you're like, this hurt, and I don't like to be hurt, and so therefore I'm going to do whatever it's going to take not to hurt. So how do you, I mean, especially when you get, some of the ones, the outliers, I mean, like, since I brought up nerve, I mean, like, imagine your teeth, right? So, like, somebody's cleaning your teeth.
I got 4.
Right? Somebody's cleaning your teeth.
Right.
It doesn't hurt.
Right.
Right? They're brushing off the outsides. You're like, cool. Like, when you get a cavity, right, in one of those teeth.
Yeah.
Now you've got to dig a little bit further.
Yeah.
Like, we've got to cut around this. We've got to fill it in. We got to make sure that the cavity's not going to, go bigger.
Yeah.
Then you get to root canals, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And that's when, like, you got to have larger doses of, like, drugs or whatever in order to be able to make, right? Because you're like, this is going to hurt.
Yeah.
Because you're getting further down. Like, this wasn't just a tooth part. This is like a root issue.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing when you're getting down to the core, when you're getting further in and you're starting to get poked and prodded a little bit, and you're like, I don't know. How am I processing this, this pain a little bit, this a little bit of getting to the root, getting to the nerve section, and it doesn't hurt, and I don't really like to feel this, and so you're like, I'm just going to hold, and that's what often happens, right? So I'm going to chase away anything that's trying to get at my nerve.
Yeah.
And that's part of the dualism. It's part of the holding to your ground and not willing to move.
Well, and the thing is that finite lines make it easier to not have to navigate change. So if there are these rules that are going to be absolutes,
right,
then it makes it really easy to adhere to, and then there's the place of where now and people have already thrown out anything that I've said because I've dropped the word experiential theologian. And they're like, well, then you don't believe in absolute truth. I didn't say that. But I'm going to test any truth that man tells me, humanness, female or male, that is an absolute. I'm going to test that but by what I see happening around me and what I live through. That just because that's one of my tests that I value.
Right.
And so where it really came up is it came up with the cessation of the spirits of the Holy Spirit after Pentecost. Baptists believe that the Holy Spirit does not work or move in the same way, because now the canon's complete. The canon, meaning the sacred texts that were compiled to be able to put together the 66 books of what we call the Bible right now. Now, big lights go on and just say there were more books written than what were canonized by early people who walked and talked with Jesus. All the works of those people weren't canonized and put into what we know as the Bible. It's that point then that what people put more faith into is they put more faith into the people who canonized the scriptures and are saying, well, it creates a consistency. What? By a bunch of old white dudes that say, yeah, we're going to take this to be able to say that it works out for us? And so this goes into, there were people who wrote things. There's a whole section in the Catholic Bible that isn't even in the non-Catholic Bible. What do you do with that? You're like, well, people were making up stuff and making it so that it fit all what they wanted to believe. Well, what would keep other people from doing the same thing in the section of these 66 books put together? Now, we can talk about the Torah. The Torah is the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of what we know as the current present-day Bible. So then you have the Pentateuch. Those are 5 books that if you wanted to sit down and have a conversation with someone of the Jewish faith, you could sit down and they're familiar with those first 5 books. But they're also familiar with the Torah. How is that different than the Book of Mormon?
Yeah.
We've got friends in the spiritual realm who would say, oh man, now you're playing with fire.
You are.
This boy is on fire. Yeah, I am. I'm playing with fire.
Right.
But see, now everybody's like, no, don't confuse everybody. Don't make this harder for them. And I'm like, or am I making it easier to say this thing that is the unseen is messy? It's not clear cut. And so what values can be in place that allow you, and ultimately it's to be able to live within yourself, to live as yourself, valued in a way that you're going to be committed to the things that you're committed to, and its purpose is not, we can go to the teachings of Jesus about whether you're a murderer or not a murderer. And basically, Jesus said, if you hate your brother, you've already committed murder in your heart. That's a hard teaching. And so if we're going to love our neighbors as ourselves, what values are we going to put in place so that we're not just talking about it? And this is the problem that I personally have with the Western cultured church, is that when people show up so that there can be some person that is telling them the ultimate truth, and there's the Thessalonians, which would be around the books of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians,
right?
They were told, prove what is being taught to you in a way so that you know that this is true. And just because somebody says I have my doctorate or I have my higher education, that does not give them a greater authority, because one of my values, and this actually, all right, Baptist, if you've held on with me this far, go with me a little step further, it's actually a commonality that you have between Lutherans and Baptists, is the priesthood of the believer. Martin Luther said, no, the priest is not the person who can only absolve. It was the shed blood of Jesus Christ that allows for. And quite frankly, if we want to go way off the track, this will blow everyone. Richard Rohr doesn't even believe in a blood atonement.
Mm.
He's Franciscan. Of course, he can believe whatever he's gonna, but people are wondering what in the world. I'm like, yeah, priesthood of the believer. So if I'm going to trust that the unseen is dwelling within me, then I'm going to trust that unseen is going to teach me in the things that I should carry out. And so me coming to God as an individual is right in line with ultimately the sacred text, God's word, the Bible, and these things are all entwined of this is how you can discern. And quite frankly, if you're troubled by it, you're like, I just can't trust myself. Can't you? Maybe you should try. And then, then you have counselors. You have people who have been given in your life, on your path, that are around you, and they can so ask the questions. Hey, am I off base here? They may say, yes, you are.
Mm-hmm.
But
then you always ask, like, where? Like, so where did I jump off the track? And so, like, you're still trying to be able to judge and discern through that. Like, if they're saying, like, well, I can't tell you where you jumped out. Well, like, ultimately, like, that's what we're having a discussion for. Like, so I've found myself in this spot. Where did I jump off the track? So if you're telling me I'm off base, I don't know what I'm talking about, well, then tell me where it was that, let's go back to that conversation. Let's talk about some of the origin of that then, and where is it that I misplaced, my whole thought process. You're calling me a heretic. All right, let's go back in this process and figure out where I'm a heretic. Where did I jump off?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the discussion that I think some people aren't willing to have. And if you are an established, been following Jesus for a lifetime, and you're going to say, I believe that I am the authority, then you're like, but are you? Like, if you are a follower of Jesus, then there is a true authority, and it's not you, and it's not me. Like, so, and that's where I'm saying, like, if we understand that together as a people, like, God's the authority, right? The unseen is the authority. Like, then we can have a conversation then about the things of the unseen.
Yeah.
And still should be able to walk away and say, you know what? I love you as my neighbor. I love you as my friend. I love you as the family. Right? And I think that's not always where it ends up.
Yeah.
And where is it that we can actually get back to that conversation and still, like, all right, so, like, you were talking about the ordinances, sacraments, you're like, so, I believe this, and you're like, oh, okay, like, well, let's talk about that. How did you end up there? Well, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I process this. And sometimes you're like, I don't know how I ended up there. All right, well, then let's deconstruct it and move backwards. And then I brought up deconstruction. And that's where some people are also offended by deconstruction.
Well, there's fear.
Hmm.
The fear is that in deconstruction, there won't be a reconstruction.
Right.
And so in that fear of what was quote unquote saved becoming lost, for fear of it not being found again. And there are, and people who, this may feel soft to some people who are listening. They're like, man, you guys, you really need to go more into what is the truth in our day and age, when people are like, well, the truth is whatever I make it to be. That is not what I'm saying.
Yeah,
What
me
I'm
either.
saying is we can't be afraid of a path of discovery. And there are awesome things. When you brought up, you were listening to a podcast on the Stoics, okay, and some of the things that were discovered there, and as I dove into, I would call it a very light study. It was amazing how many of the YouTube ads then became about Stoicism.
Right.
But there is a commonality in the teaching of the Stoics that I could fall in line with. And that is, they're like, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, and live today like it's your last. So what you're going to do is, and what it means is you've already accepted that you're dead. Well, it sounds very unnervingly
Fatalistic.
well, and again, another hard teaching of Jesus. What will it profit a person to gain the whole world and yet to lose their soul? So take up your cross, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. What is that? He was speaking forwardly, talk about time travel. He already knew what the outcome was going to be, his death on the cross.
Right.
And in that, he's like saying, accept the end of you, because you really don't get to live until you've died. Everybody's thinking about resurrection, living, as a living that occurs in the spiritual realm after your body has died. But really, in the teaching is that there is a resurrected living here on this earth while we're here within the bodies. And everybody's like, boom. Oh my God, you actually believe that? And the answer I can say is yes, I firmly believe that. Well, I can't pick that up from the rest of your language through the last part of this hour and 5 minutes, 7 minutes of this podcast. And the point is that I'm not here to declare what I believe as the absolutes. I'm saying these words to invite people to be really okay with the journey. Really okay with the discovery. Be okay with not knowing everything, and the absolutism of what you believe is the end of the journey, because that you may discover. And so then it goes back to the sacred texts, and then the evangelicals would argue that the sacred texts were wholly inspired by God, and moving through the pens of the men and the men who wrote said books, and that. And my question would be, let me unnerve you. Can you believe that you can be inspired today? I literally, again, based on my experience, I have been sitting in, and illumination has occurred within me as I've been considering things before the unseen that I had never thought of and never and I'm like, oh wow, this has just blown up, and it has changed me. It has moved me. And so I would end up, I would go back to, I think it's in Philippians chapter, fruit of the Spirit.
That's Galatians 5:22.
Ah, there you go. Thank you. Now, does everybody see how this tag team is working out? In Galatians, talking about the fruit of the Spirit. You know what? I think these are good things. I think these are good tests.
Yeah.
And so when I look at absolutes, I want to test it against the fruit of the Spirit to see what it produces. I think that's a really good value to have. Yeah. Now, people are like, yeah, but you didn't even know where to find it. Well, with the right Bible, I would have, because I got it underlined, and, it's bookmarked, and, and that kind of thing. But, and we can go back to my philosophy on the Holy Spirit and how that all interacts. And I would take everyone back to 1 Corinthians 13. You could have the tongues of angels, but if you don't have love, it's like a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. I don't know how cymbals tinkle.
Yeah, I think that might be translation because some of it's clanging cymbal.
Yeah, I totally gave it the Koval translation.
Right. But
just so that I could tell a tinkling joke.
Right. Tinkle here and there.
Yeah. So, but we may not be able to judge the heart of people.
Yeah.
I would personally say that's not your job.
We can't.
But you can test fruit. What is the outcome? If what is in your life is chaos, if what is in your life is leading to destruction, if what is in your life is causing this unrest,
Mm-hmm.
so then come back to what are your values and what do you believe?
Yeah, it leads me to like something that in where we talk about whether it's deconstruction. I also have come to a place of reset. So it's like there was something that was set, and now it needs to be reset. And so, like for me, once again, listening to a podcast, and there was a guy who's like a 10-time, like some setting records, world records on like exploration, and he walked across Antarctica in 53 days, and like he does, and he started talking about this kind of a reset of mind, and he talks about a 12-hour walk. He said you walk out your door and you don't come back for 12 hours. And you are resetting, so it means you also need to, our phones are, everything. So it that's where I listen to my podcast. It's where I listen to music. It's where I listen to whatever. I get information from there. He says, put your phone, if it's a smart one, on airplane mode.
Okay.
And he's like, and with airplane mode, you can't get texts, you can't get calls. You can't access your data, right? So you can't pull up the Google. You can't pull up anything that's internet based, which is pretty much everything, right? So you're in this 12-hour journey.
Yeah.
You're listening. You're like, so what's coming to mind? What are the things that you can learn across this 12-hour journey of like, it's a reset. So with me, a lot of like the stuff that, we've mentioned here on the podcast, like silence and quietness are not like things that I enjoy.
Sure, yeah.
Like I like noise, I like things that are happening, and even in the background, even if I'm not paying attention to it, I still like something in the background. I like multiple things happening at one time because there's always movement, right? And so I feel like at a moment in time, this thing right here has now spoken to me and said, like, maybe a reset is good.
Yeah.
And saying, you know what, like, there's so much chaos and so much, like, so I'm contemplating and walking through this now. What would it look like to do a 12-hour walk? Leaving the house, not coming back, and for 12 hours. And what is that going to do?
Yeah.
What can that do? What can I learn? Both about myself, about the world, and I think it might cause a reset of mind and a reset of, things. So that's something I'm contemplating right now as a part of that reset. Yeah.
Well, I went 30 days without drinking any alcohol.
Yeah.
And made that, 35, 37 days or whatever. And what I would tell you about that time was that it really changed my perspective. Now, I will also say, in public record, I had already started that journey before you had a message, and in the message, what came out of that, what I ended up wearing out of that message was you spent some time talking about self-control. Now, my ego was like, well, thank God you're already on the wagon, But that truth came into me, and it's like having a rack or having hangers where you can hang something and keep it close. And what I will say is that in practice, I really enjoyed that reset because it cleared a motivation for consuming. I love that it's not the thing that I'm thinking about all the time. And by all the time, I mean at the end of the day when I'm tired and wondering which six-pack I was going to pick up. Okay? The other thing is that after consuming alcohol, since that reset, it's really easy for me the next day to get up and say, you know what? That is not the goal of my enjoyment. It brings a clarity into perspective of living and how I want to do that. And quite frankly, what I would say to so people are like, so you're against drinking? No. See?
Yeah, you're missing it already.
Yeah. You're missing it. So you're in the program? No. It to your point, what a powerful word. This reset.
Yeah.
And to say, self-medication can occur on so many levels. It's not just alcohol.
Right.
Self-medication can be drinking coffee. Self-medication can be consuming food. Self-medication can be sugar. I mean, there's so many things.
It could be isolation, right?
Yeah, that's true. That is so true. And so, and on the flip side, the thing that we do know about, addiction is that in being addicted to, and that brings your point, you can be addicted to chaos. Some people have to create chaos or they don't feel comfortable. It could be from formation. It could be from early childhood life. It could be, it could be from trauma. It could be from, abuse. I mean, like chaos, life's not good unless it's chaotic. And these things roll. And so coming back to, there are, it really, this part, I would just say, hey, enjoy the journey, move into a season of discovery, and in discovery, start asking yourself, does this truth that's being presented end up displacing all that I've been taught in the past? Or does it move me towards wholeness and wellness? And I think that those markers, it's not about the amount of money you make, it's about the amount of money you spend. Well, some people are addicted to shopping, right? And then they, and it's like, well, yeah, it's not the heroin that's keeping the food off the table. It's the Amazon boxes sitting on my front step. I mean, all of this stuff is all intertwined.
Oh, yeah.
And so, in a level of confession, I think that there's a part of coming to a place to be able to say, I am unsettled in my core, and you just need to sit down and say, please shine the light on the things that are creating chaos within me. And if you take 15 minutes a day for 7 days and you just do that, you're going to have a list. And these are the areas you should consider a reset with.
Yeah. That is something new, right? I mean, so you're going to sit with things and maybe it's a renewed thing, but it also could be new. And you're going to sort through those new things. And you're going to say, what does this mean for me today? In my current, as you mentioned before, season. In this current portion of my life. What does this mean for me right now?
Yeah. And so then that goes into, can you trust that that which is outside of you is working toward influencing you, the unseen? If need be, deity, God, Jesus, Isa, so that which is outside of you is already in motion to work within you.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you from personal experience, there's been 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe it's the third, man, I was just really, really sad. And I mean, like, literally, I'd be driving down the highway and tears would start coming down my face. I'm like, what is going on within me?
Mm-hmm.
And, and Amy and I had conversation around it. She's like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, you know what? I feel alone. But what it ended up being is that it was really, it was a sadness. It was grief. And it was coming into the backpack weekend at Tabor. And in that, at one point, it was the Friday before, I'm at the studio, and I'm like, what is going on inside me? And so I just took a moment of, you can call it meditation, you can call it reflection, you can call it this 15 minutes of writing down the list. And what I did is I walked through a mental imagery of the different emotional seat of, am I angry? No, I'm not angry. Is there anything making me angry? No. And so then I went like, well, this certainly isn't happiness. Are these tears of joy? No. Okay, the alone part was the sense of loss. And it was surrounded by a really good friend of mine. Her anniversary of her death was emotionally connected to the backpack weekend. Mm-hmm. And that celebration, and her having been a part of me singing and making music and a part of that band collective previously known as Carbon Canaries, it was my physical and emotional body was more in tune with the time of year than my mental state or awareness, and it was working itself out of me without me knowing what was going on.
Mm.
As soon as I acknowledged that, the tears were gone. I mean, it was like, just like that. Mm. And I'm like, oh, this is the deal, and so I had that conversation later that day with Amy, and she goes, oh, you really miss your friend. And I'm like, it's so weird, because I don't go through every day thinking how much I miss her.
Mm-hmm. And
yet, within me, there was a sense of grief coming out of me physically and emotionally. And as soon as that was acknowledged, so this idea of sitting, and the idea of, maybe the question is, what do I value? Push into that part that brings joy, push into that part that brings anxiety, push into that part that, quite frankly, and if people aren't ready to hear this, the church has put harm and hurt and difficulty on a lot of people. So it may not be inside the church walls that a person works out their health and wholeness.
Right.
And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that you don't love God. It doesn't mean that you aren't loved by God.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, how can you? I'm not preaching a gospel of attendance.
Right.
What I'm doing is I'm imploring a season of discovery,
mm-hmm.
and let the gospel be made known. And that is not Christianese for Jesus, love, salvation. Gospel is just a simple old word that means good news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you turn on anything to hear news today, what good is being brought to you by the news?
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is, the unseen desires for there to be good news for your heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's a path of discovery.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, your acknowledgement of and going through a system to try to be able to analyze. I don't think a lot of people do that.
Oh.
And so, like, I mean, what would have happened if you didn't? Would it have just continued to exist, and you're like, there's something here, but I don't really want to deal with it, so I'm just going to keep moving. Or, yeah, I don't really know what it is, let's keep moving. You know, so there's that part that I think that going back to and then stopping in those moments and having that reflection.
Yeah.
Like, what's the root? You
Yeah.
know, what's the issue that's there? And going back to it, you're like, hey, like, I recognize it, I see it now, and it no longer has that power.
Right. Yeah. And
I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't miss her still. It doesn't mean that that it just means like you understood the source.
Well, and how crazy is our bodies that there was a physical manifestation of the unseen grief within me, of an emotional piece that worked itself out,
Right.
and brought me back. Now, the cool thing is that, this part of the path happened during the 37 days of, not having had a drink,
Mm-hmm.
The really cool thing is that, I come back and, am working through a work week and stuff like that. Again, that idea of reset, renew is just really liberating.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that I can be in tune with and aware of and working through other things. And it's not like, oh man, recovering from a really long night yesterday, and how do I get over that? Again, just the idea of how any imbalance, chemical or otherwise, can become a cloud or a veil or a curtain towards, and I think people have to come up and say, oh, you know what? I'm really tired
Mm-hmm.
of the redundant circle that I continue working myself around, and I want to walk towards health and wholeness. And in that, and so with all of the information that's available, just find out what do you value. Do you value loving others? All right, now the next question is, how are you showing that in your life? Or is it an aspirational goal?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to love others. Okay.
Yeah. So what's it going to take to get there?
What's it look like? How are you working that out?
Mm-hmm.
Or, it's really healthy to be able to say, you know what? I'm very dualistic in my mindset, and I'm connected to a tribe. Perfect. But how can you recognize your tribalism and dualism and become open to that other people are okay? Well, I don't like where this world's going to. Oh, yeah, that's been a major crime against humanity since the inception.
Right. And you wouldn't be the first one who would say that or think that.
Right.
I mean, every single generation's always like, the generation behind us is, they're going to be our destruction.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Every single time.
But trust me, the droughts and the lack of water, like all of the difficulties that are going on around this world in this life, ultimately what we have to do is, how can we be best equipped to face what is in front of us? And that's where I don't throw out the ancients with our present day information of what we have. You can have all kinds of information. It doesn't mean... What parts are you able to bite off and be able to bring in to live out in this way of peace?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's our chat.
That's good stuff today. Good stuff for you to consider in your own path and journey right now, and whatever season you find yourself in. It's always these are good things to consider.
And just remember, if you're looking for a hot sauce that tastes really good, Tortugas Lie, North Carolina, right there. I was so easily distracted by the opportunity to be able to promote hashtag not a sponsor.
It is good. It is a good hot sauce, though.
Send us, and I do have to say, little sneak peek into the holiday season. I almost came with a box of hot sauces for you. Costco has a new ad, and it's in this wooden crate, and it's all these different hot sauces from around the world. So, Now, my countertop right now is so full of hot sauces that I haven't used up yet, I couldn't, in good faith, gesture towards a life of minimalism, be able to make the purchase right now. Or I just end up trading out, which is like throwing good money after bad. So I probably not going to do it.
Right. Not just yet.
Not going to do it. Another Dana Carvey.
Sort through what you've got before you get to something you don't get.
Yeah. And worst case scenario, just remember, if the sun is shining in your part of the world, maybe you get some sunshine, maybe you get some clouds, but it depends on how you feel about it, whether that makes it a good day for you. Yeah.
Perspective.
It's all perspective. All right, Phil.
All right.
Everybody, peace.
Have a good Sunday, or whenever you're listening. See ya.